Welcome this morning to our guests. I'm glad you're here. And to those who call New Life your home, I'm glad you came back. I'm glad me wearing a robe last week didn't scare you off. I'm Juno, and it's good to be here. Now, there's no way I'm going to get up here and not mention the fact that my daughter just prayed. But let me say, a year ago, my how time flies, a year ago we were here. But we were on the stealth visit. And I was here with Ray and Florence. We sat about here. And we got clearance from the search team who was looking for the pastor to say, hey, could Mackenzie be here? Because then we were in Arizona. She was coming over to spend spring break in California. And I said, hey, I'm checking out this church. Do you want to be here too? I said, but you just have to ignore me. And she's, that's easy to do, Dad. And so, but as we're sitting here, 5 minutes, I'm thinking, where are they at? Where are they at? They're not here yet. And even after that, they walk in, and I guess they just got paraded right into the front row. And I'm trying not to text her saying, where were you? But just think what happens in a year. She goes from sitting in the chair to being a part of our community. And so I'm grateful, and it is great to be here. As Chris had shared, we're in Lent, and as many of you are fully aware of, Lent is that time preceding Easter. It's that time when we are intentional, no matter what our background. The idea is to try to be intentional about our faith. Try to spend a little bit more time on the things that are most important. And so last week we talked about in our series of Torn, exploring new pathways to God, we talked about the naturalist. We talked about how the naturalist connects with God in nature. Then we also talked about the traditionalist who likes the formal services, who likes routines and rituals. Today we're going to talk about sensates, a word some of us have a hard time pronouncing. Trust me, I worked on it all week. And ascetics. And so we're going to dive into that and to expand our perspective on how God has created some of the people that are in this room. Let us pray. We're thankful, God, for your presence here. Again, I'm thankful for those here who have put a pause on their going out to have a fun time in the sun to being here in your house. For those who have come in with heavy hearts, I give you thanks because I know you're a God that can meet them where they're at. To those who are coming in with a joyous heart and with a heart of gratitude, I give you thanks. Because it's through them as well that your good news will be shared. And so may the thoughts of all the hearts here of your people, may the words that come out of my mouth be acceptable in your sight, God, because you are our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. So again, today we're going to talk about the sensates. The people who love God through their senses. Hence the name sensates. The different senses. Are you somebody who feels closest to God when you are in a church that allows your senses to come alive? A place where you can smell and hear and almost taste the majesty of God. And if inside you're just going, ew, well, you're probably not a sensate. If that sentence you just thought, what am I doing here? Then that probably means that's not one of the ways that God has wired you. And that's okay. Because again, God has wired us all differently. And the issue isn't I'm right and they're wrong. God made me right and made them wrong. That must have been something he did on the Friday before he took a Sabbath. No, the issue is we're different, and that's good. Do you enjoy attending a high church. I'm not talking about the chemical dependency that gets you high, for those of you who are demented like I am. But do you like a more formal church? A church where everything, and I use the word scripted not to be degrading, but descriptive and planned out and in the program where everything is laid out step by step by step. Are you the type of a person that is thrilled by the opportunity to participate in communion? Now, some of the high churches, some of the more formal churches would call that Eucharist. And Eucharist means to give thanks. But now a difference, how we participate in that is, we'll say these are symbols reminding us of the death of Jesus. And those who use the word Eucharist, not all, but most of them, will say that the bread and the cup are transformed into God's body and to his blood. Now, the big theological word for that is I had to spell this out here, transubstantiation. I can't even spell it, let alone pronounce it. Again, that's not degrading that. That's just to say, oh, that's what that means. Again, for us and the Reformed tradition, it's a symbol. It's a reminder of what Christ has done for us. And for those who use the term Eucharist, they take it as the bread and the cup transform, and some of you are probably from that background, transform into the body, into the blood of Christ. That's why in some of the very formal churches, they don't dispose of what's left from communion. Because they're thinking, if I pour this down the drain, that's the blood of Christ just wasted. If I throw the communion elements in the trash, I'm throwing away the body of Christ. I'm not saying, and we're not saying that's wrong. We just practice and we understand that tradition in a different perspective. So for some of you, you're thinking, that is a great idea of celebrating communion each and every day and week. In fact, some of you are thrilled the fact that we offer it each week here. Do some of you have a difficult time worshiping in a church building that is plain? Worshiping in a church building that has banners up that talks about the football team winning the state championships, about the basketball team going to nationals, that has the school motto plastered all over the walls. Many new churches start in rented places. Many of them are in the gyms of schools. And so for some people, it's not an issue. They're not affected by the surroundings. Their senses are not impacted by the fact that the Bulldogs win the championship. Who cares? They're able to separate those things for the sake of the kingdom and to realize we're starting a new church. Who cares what the building looks like? And for those of you who are sensates, you're going, how in the world am I able to enter the presence of God with this stuff on the wall? Again, not a right or wrong. It's a difference of how God has programmed you to connect with Him. Are you naturally driven to museums and to concerts and to things that have more cultural impact versus taking a walk in the woods, versus helping out in the local soup kitchen, versus grabbing a good book, no matter how good it is, and curling up and just reading it one night? Would you rather be in a place where you're stimulated on many different levels? And if you are, then you're a sensate type of a person. You connect with God through your senses. Well, if you are listening, and if you are thinking, I am no way even describing you again, folks, that's okay. Because I think at times, for those of us in our tradition, this may be one of the most difficult pathways to connect with. Not because it's wrong, but because for some of us, that's just not a part of our tradition. Or at least part of the tradition we can remember. But I again believe that if indeed during Lent we take steps to explore new pathways, I'm convinced, as you read on the front of your program, that we will continue to be a community where there are a growing number of Christ followers who are creating communities marked by reconciliation, peace, justice, and hope. Not saying you need to do these things, but maybe it's an opportunity to explore a new pathway to God. Some of you have seen this famous portrait of the prodigal son. Some will say that this portrait, as they look at it, has moved them to a very deep and meaningful relationship with the Savior. They have said their life is never the same because of this. And others of you are going, never seen it before, never will see it before. It just doesn't trigger anything. This portrait in and of itself, I'm not sure if you have you had a message series on this, on the prodigal son? Okay. This portrait has numerous nuances to it that I think would enlighten all of us at the right time and the right place. But not today. But again, an opportunity where a sensate would say, this is good. In fact, I have this hanging up in my office as a reminder that sometimes I'm the prodigal son. Sometimes I'm the good son. Sometimes I'm the forgiver. And to know that the people I serve, you, all play those roles also at different times. Some of us are saying that for those believers who connect with this, we need to really, maybe it's me, folks, I need to cleanse my thoughts of thinking, they're a little weird. No, they're just different than me, and it doesn't make them weird. In fact, it may make them more normal than I am, because we're different. But let's take a look in Luke chapter 2, verse 11. The idea when incense was used, because some of us, again, we keep incense to the churches that we're not a part of. We wouldn't burn incense here. That just isn't right. Well, Luke 2:11, on entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they knelt down and paid him homage. Then opening their treasure chest, they offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And then in Luke chapter 1, we read, he was chosen by lot according to the custom of the priesthood to enter the sanctuary of the Lord and offer incense. Now, at this time of the incense offering, the whole assembly of the people was praying outside. Then there appeared to him an angel of the Lord standing at the right side of the altar of incense. So again, it's a great reminder that incense was used, has been used since before the time of Jesus to help enhance the worship experience. I think we continue that in that tradition in our homes in more ways than you may think. For those of you who are realtors, you know that if you bake cookies before you show the home, in fact, those are some of the tips if you go online about selling, bake cookies because people will smell them. And that's a good feeling. For some of us, we burn candles all the time around our homes. In fact, I had one of those coupons from, what is it? Yeah, Bed Bath and Body Works, buy one, get one, they always have those coupons. And so I told Mackenzie, I'm going to go get some candles. She goes, no, go with me. I go, I'm just going to go, the sale's over tomorrow. And, get the ones that smell like spring. Because I'm sure many of us who have converted, and I won't say backslid to buying an artificial Christmas tree, but for those of you who have an artificial Christmas tree, how many of you go around the house spraying pine incense? Because you want it to smell like Christmas. So I think we're much more attracted, we're much more of a sensory person than we probably admit at times. Our response stations touch some of those people who are sensates. Again, to come forward as a part of the process, it gets them moving. And then today I even added a cross up here because that's important for them to be able to see this and a candle at this station. But the idea of taking the bread and drinking the cup engages people more than just in their minds. And all of us know we can have a head knowledge, but it just stops at our head. It needs to go through our entire body, and the sensates realize the value of that. The same thing with a wedding band. A wedding ring. I know people who have lost it, and they're just like, oh, I've lost my wedding ring. And they have to go out and spend all this money again because they lost it. And the wedding doesn't make you married. It's a reminder of the love that you have for one another. It took me several years to no longer wear the wedding band after my wife passed away. I would carry it in my pocket. And then somehow I lost the thing, so I thought, well, so much for that idea. Just as a reminder, so whenever I went in and got some change, that it doesn't say, it doesn't define who I am, but it reminds me of a part of my history. We do the same thing, folks, when you have a cross in your home. We talked about this a little bit last week. When you have some photographs of your loved ones, those are stimulating different aspects of your life, and it's not a sin to have a picture of your loved one in your office. It reminds you of a commitment you have, of a life that you have, and it just triggers other parts of your being versus just knowing, when I get home, my family is going to be there. Let me show you a couple. This cross here I have up in my office. My wife made this for me, and it's not just a piece of decoration, but for me, it symbolizes that, we're all broken. None of us have it all together. None of us are perfect. But because of the cross, we are made whole. And so that's just a reminder. And then this cross is made of barbed wire because one of my pet peeves is that I think we forget the sacrifice of the cross. It becomes more of a decoration than the reality that it was the most painful form of execution that was out there. And so this cross just reminds me of the pain and the suffering of Jesus. Also, there's another way to remind us during the Lenten season of the pain and the suffering of Jesus, and that is to have a spike with you. I have several things in my office that remind me of the faith. And this spike, if you carried it with you, you could just drop it in your pocket. And as a reminder of the sacrifice that Jesus made. You can put it in your purse, keep it in the cup holder in your car as a reminder. As you leave today, we'll be giving you a spike. For those of you who want one, I don't want to push any of you over the edge of thinking I'm trying to transform you into a sensate. But I think for all of us, we do need the reminders of what our faith is about, and especially during this season of Lent. In the back of your program, there are other reminders, other ways for you to maybe explore this new pathway. I think for some of us, maybe we can create a spot for our time with God. I visited somebody this summer, and they have about a 10 by 10 shed, all glass on one side, and an A-frame, and it just looks like a mini chapel. But it's a garden shed. And they just moved into the home, and they said, "What should we do with this?" I said, not to sound like I'm going off the deep end or anything, but why don't you make that a little prayer room? Just a little time that you can go and read. Put some candles in there. Put a cross in there. Put some of your favorite artwork in there that reminds you of your faith. They loved the idea, but didn't grow up with that tradition. And they're like, "That's not weird, is it?" And I just think it's interesting that as the older I get, and I still have quite a few years to get really old, the more I realize the importance of a place. For most of us here today, we live our lives, our busy lives, and yet we are intentional to come to this place on a Sunday morning. Because this place takes you to a place in your heart where you can connect with others and with God. So I don't think having a place at home is all that weird at all. Some other examples here would be to use symbols. Use them a little bit more often, maybe. Maybe take the nail with you to the office. Carry it with you as a way to remind you in a different way of the love that Jesus has for each of us. And one last one on there is for those of you who are more sensates, or maybe you'd like to move into that. Maybe you need to draw your prayers. Draw your expression of faith and what you're feeling that day out. If you're like me, you have a stack about this high of a bunch of Christmas cards. And most of the time it's like, what do you do with these Christmas cards? Well, use them to guide your prayer. You may not be able to get all through them all in one prayer setting, that's okay. But throughout the week, take one or two and use them to trigger in your heart and in your mind those people who have sent you, the old-fashioned people who have sent you a Christmas card. And it'll be a reminder for those of us who lean into the digital side of things that maybe next year we'll send a card. But again, opportunities for us to connect with God with our whole being, not just our mind. And then let's talk about what it means to be an ascetic person. The person that loves God by solitude and simplicity. So we go from the person whose pathway to God is triggered by our senses to somebody who at times could be some of the opposite of that. Simplicity and solitude. So do you feel closest to God when you are alone and there is nothing to distract you from focusing on God's presence? Are you somebody that would describe your faith something that is more internal than external? Do the words of silence and solitude and discipline, are they your friendly words, or are those words that you're just going, ew, I don't want to do that? Does the idea of taking an overnight retreat by yourself at a camp, at a local monastery, to where most of the time you're going to be spent in silence, do you just thrive for that opportunity? Or again, are you thinking, okay, somebody's gone off the deep end, and they're just spending all this time alone with them and God? Would you, rather than join your neighborhood watch patrol, would you rather just spend some time at night walking through your neighborhood, praying for the people on your street? Well, that's the personality of an ascetic person who gravitates towards solitude and simplicity. Now, again, I believe somebody who is ascetic in their pathway to God probably is more countercultural than any of the pathways. Because part of it is living a simple lifestyle, which is definitely countercultural to most of us here. The person who is ascetic is a person who really cannot wait till they get alone. They don't even need music. They just sit in silence. They pour out their heart to God, and they listen to what God may be saying to them. And for many of us, that is difficult. We are so bombarded with the beeps, the notifications on our electronic devices, from our phones ringing to our alarm clocks. We are so controlled by noise that we have no idea what it means to be silent. And I will admit, it is easier said than done. We have talked about this in the past. I've spoken on this a little bit. And how, as you, some people say, I talk about, a retreat, an overnight retreat, where most of it's in silence. Some of you are saying, take me home, Jesus. That can never happen for me. And so you don't go to that extreme. But try 5 minutes. That's going to seem like an hour. Try 15 minutes. For people like me, that would mean leave my phone away from the desk. Turn off or minimize the computer screen. Just sit. Sit and see what God brings to your mind. Now, I think it's important to realize that times of solitude and times of silence just isn't a popular event in our modern-day busy culture. But again, let's just remember that before Jesus launched his public ministry, that he spent 40 days in solitude and fasting. Jesus taught us that prayer should be done in secret. He also assumed that his disciples would eventually fast, and he returned to solitude during the difficult moments of his ministry. When he heard that John the Baptist was murdered, Jesus spent time by himself. When the crowds were pressing in on him, Jesus was intentional to try to get by himself. And so during Lent, maybe in a way to explore a new pathway, would be to literally be by yourself. Not for a weekend, but for a few moments. And expand that as time goes on. Maybe you will need to find that special place where you can connect with God so you know that this is that place. Because most of us, and I'm going to say, I think, a side note here, isn't in the script, I think most of us are probably a little ADD. I think it's something we're eating, drinking, in the air. We get sidetracked on everything all the time. So having a place that will tell your body this is that moment is key. So find that. It may be in your living room. You're not going to, not to stereotype, I don't want to say, ladies, this isn't a time to redecorate your whole house so you can have a space. But just take one of those natural spaces, your favorite chair, and make that your time with God. But I've noticed with all of these pathways, they can become pretty important to us. And they should be, because that's how God has wired us. But I think it's important that we realize in none of these pathways that they become our God. The things, the nail I have in my pocket, the cross, that doesn't become God. My walks in nature doesn't become God. But it's through those pathways that we can connect with God in a deeper way, and our life will become more like His. So God can use all these pathways to bring us closer to Him, but they don't replace Him. And so I think that's important to remember as we go through this. In fact, Ephesians 2:8, as I was studying this week, I thought, I think this verse is key for this series. For by grace you have been saved through faith, and that not of your own doing. It is the gift of God, not of works, so that no one would boast. I think that's a reminder that the gift of God is in Jesus, not by anything we do. Even though at times it does bring us closer to God. So how do we increase that idea of maybe living a more simple lifestyle? Maybe to improve that aesthetic part of who we are? Again, on the back of your program, here are some more ideas. I think on the days that you can, without getting fired, for those of you who are working, shut off the alarm, and when you wake up, get up. Meaning if you need to sleep an extra hour, then sleep. But if you wake up at 4 a.m, it's time to get up and take some time in solitude. Take some time in prayer. Don't fight it. This morning, I woke up at 3. I said, forget that. I'm going back to bed. I know what I'm teaching you today. I am not getting up at 3. I have to be ready to go. And so what I do when I wake up in the middle of the night, what happens often, I think about my friends on the West Coast. And I did at 3 a.m. 3, 4, 5, it's 6 o'clock in Michigan. So my pastor buddies are all waking up, getting ready for their messages, probably reviewing them. So I go through a big list until I fall back to sleep of my friends who are getting ready to share with their church. So rather than fight it or get upset with it or say, Lord, why am I awake again at 3 or 4? Okay, who do I pray for? Then I go back to sleep. I woke up at 6, and that was good. But I think I'm not the only one that wakes up in the middle of the night. You know what? I'm big on 3x5 cards. Get a 3x5 card. Put the people you want to pray for, so when you wake up in the middle of the night, you don't have to think too much like, who was it? Just go to your hit list. Pray for those people. Maybe add to that hit list somebody who is far from God. somebody that you would love to invite here on Easter. Add them to your hit list. And pray for them whenever you wake up. Living a simple lifestyle, clean out some junk drawers. Get a little bit more organized. Clean out a closet. Clean out your vehicle. Now again, let me be clear. Cleanliness is not close to godliness. Some of you folks who are really particular about everything in life, you'll say, good, he's preaching Scripture. No, that's your type A personality. But I think for many of us, we just have too much stuff. And how many times, let's face it, I know when I was moving here, Mackenzie didn't know we were going to move, but I knew something was happening. So I started to clean out the junk drawers. And then, in fact, I even posted them on Facebook because, these drawers were horrible. You got those drawers that you try to shove the thing closed, and then you got to ask forgiveness because of what you just said about that drawer not closing. And so let's just face it, clean it out, throw stuff out. Your life will be simpler. Have a garage sale. Most of us have too much of stuff. And not to create money to buy more stuff, which we'd all like to do, but to create maybe an emergency fund. So when you need a new battery for your vehicle, you don't have to charge it. When the car breaks down, you may have a couple $100 from this garage sale to help repair the vehicle. Maybe it's to help with our, Breno, what are those little boxes called? The giving boxes that you're handing outside, I think, to drop in some coins or some bills or some checks for some of our outreach workers. So give the money away, not keep it for yourself. And another simple thing to do to help you who are non-ascetic is when you're having a meal, invite somebody over. And I'm not saying that for my sake. Don't invite me over. Invite a friend. Invite somebody you don't know. The neighbor that you keep forgetting their name. Just simply say, hey, I made some extra lasagna. Why don't you come over? Don't tell them I'm praying for you on my hit list. I'm hoping you're coming to Jesus. Why don't you come over and have a meal? It'll be like, I'm not going over there. Have a conversation. Build a relationship. Be a light in your home. So there are all kinds of opportunities for us to live a life of a little bit more quietness. But I think we need to be intentional about it. I'm going to ask the band to come back out, and they're going to lead us into our response time. And for our guests, you'll find those response times explained to you in a card in front of you in the seat. But if God is leading you to respond in a different way, feel free to do that. If you want to remain seated, you are free to do that as well. Let me share with you a quote from Dietrich Bonhoeffer. He's the great German theologian, a martyr for the faith. He says, if we do not have some element of ascetic in us, we'll find it hard to follow Jesus. And so I think as we think through Lent about what it means to be torn, as we think about exploring new pathways with God, may we all apply the words of that simple chorus from the Psalms, and those of you who know it can sing it. Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am God.